All right, guys, welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick, we're doing our preview and prediction for number 4 Alabama traveling to Madison to take on the Badgers in an intriguing non-conference matchup. 15-point line in favor of the Crimson Tide. 48.5 is the total. 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. Looking at the Alabama offense, this is a unit that certainly had its struggles against USF. At one point, I think they had 6 straight 3-and-outs or something like that. It was a disaster for this offense. They really cranked it up in the fourth quarter, though. A lot of mistakes, and that's probably going to be the biggest concern we want to talk about right off the bat. Is they're going on the road to a tough environment. 13 team penalties. I think 10 of them I counted were on the offensive line. Road games over the past couple of years have been disastrous for this team in that exact same category, Nick, in terms of just discipline and being able to stay sound up front on the defensive line. Offsides, false starts, whatever it may be, holdings. It's just been a disaster the past couple of years, and it was the same exact thing against the G5 opponent at home against USF. A 70 to 80 yard rushing touchdown by Jalen Milroe was wiped out on a holding call. It was just so hard for them to stay in sync and in rhythm, Nick, regardless of your opponent. If you continue to have penalties like that, one negative play, you have another penalty after that. It doesn't matter what kind of positives you have, it's going to be hard to really establish much. Milroe's been a great leader this year, though. He stayed incredibly composed on the sideline throughout the game. While, a lot of his teammates were getting frustrated. This is a guy that has almost 500 yards of total offense, 9 touchdowns, no interceptions. Milroe, I'm very confident in his ability to come in here and protect the football. But if they keep making mistakes like this, they're probably just going to lose, Nick. That's quite frank about it. It's got to stop. It's been like this for years. Going on the road to Madison, that's a bit of a concern.
It's been a problem for a while. We saw issues against Texas in 2022 where they had a ton of penalties in that game. We saw issues against Tennessee in 2022 where they lost that game as well. A lot of penalties in that one. We saw some issues last year with penalties as well on the road. We've seen it at A&M in the past. We've seen it in some of these tougher environments where this team just gets penalized over and over again. It's completely unacceptable. And now it's bridging 2 errors. At the end of the Saban era, it was very sloppy, and it was unrecognizable. Alabama, they were getting so many penalties. Saban just could not. I could understand how a Saban-led team would have so many offensive penalties, especially false starts. Those are mental mistakes. You cannot be making mistakes like that on the road. And then so far in the DeBoer era, this was a bad showing on the offensive line. A lot of penalties, tons of false starts, bad holds all over the place. Certainly on a few players, some really bad holds, bringing back big plays. They cannot have this happen against Wisconsin on the road. Camp Randall's a tough place to play, underrated tough place to play. You cannot make mistakes like that. You cannot have penalties because you're just going to set yourself back. And when you have drives that are, first and 15, second and 15, first and 20, you're not going to be able to run the ball. You're not going to be able to run your offense, run your playbook how you want to, and that's going to really put you behind the chains. A big issue that Alabama has to try and figure out, cannot have a ton of penalties in this game, or they're going to be really in a lot of trouble.
And of course, we'll talk about the offensive line. This is a unit that certainly has had its struggles despite an abundance of talent. And even though Caden Proctor really struggled last year, his absence is certainly missed as they did a lot of reshuffling. Tyler Booker playing out of position at left tackle. Didn't have the greatest of games. Gino Van Denmark, the transfer, ended up playing at left guard. Ended up having a pretty solid contest, but he had a lot of penalties as well. Parker Brailsford is now standing center. Jaden Roberts, a guy at right guard you never seem to talk about just how good he is. And, of course, they have a right tackle, Wilkin Formby, who is just no good at all. Elijah Pritchett needs to see the field in some type of capacity. Proctor, questionable for this game. I'm just going to lean with he's probably not going to play, so maybe the same rotation they had last week, or the starting 5, that is, will be in place for this game. The offensive line, again, Nick, abundance of talent. Have been struggling to put it together. If they can cut down the mental mistakes, they'll be just fine because this quarterback is a heck of a playmaker, and he's great at bailing them out and doing it all by himself. As long as they don't do things that call his plays back, which, again, that's something that just cannot happen in a road game like this. An 80-yard touchdown getting wiped out would drive me crazy in the video game, Nick. So in real life, I can only imagine it's an incredible headache.
No scenario should Wilkin Formby be starting for Alabama on Saturday. Doesn't make any sense how he was still getting reps late in the game. You got to find some way to get Pritchett and Van Denmark involved in this offensive line. I really hope Proctor is fully healthy. I don't think he will be. I'm going to agree with you, err on the side of that he's not going to play. I don't know if you keep Booker at left tackle. You probably do. Maybe move Van Denmark at left guard, put Pritchett at right tackle. I don't really know exactly how you want to do it. Roberts and Brailsford have looked really good. Roberts, I'm especially very happy with at right guard because he was an underrated player coming into this season. We knew Brailsford was going to be really solid as a transfer. Didn't really know what to expect out of Roberts. He's been really good at right guard. But when you have your right tackle making many mistakes, it doesn't look too great on the offensive line as a whole. Need to see a lot better. They were getting so many bad. There were a lot of plays where flags were not thrown on holds that probably should have been thrown as well. just a complete mess in the offensive line. And it really hurts this run game and it hurts Milroe, whose best asset is his legs. He's a really talented runner. He could really do a whole lot. If you that 80-yard touchdown got wiped away, he had some other big runs. He's great in the red zone on the ground. If you can provide him running lanes, Milroe will be able to dash all over this Wisconsin defense.
Yeah, and the supporting cast, and we'll talk about this running game, they're really starting to find the groove, it seems, especially in that fourth quarter where they had 28 points. J.M. Miller averaging about 10 yards per carry this season, a buck 40 and a score against USF. Justice Haynes was a little bit quieter, but these guys, they've both been productive in the first two games. And of course, Miller has 2 rushing touchdowns in each of the first 2 contests. This is a guy who can provide a lot of yards, but in terms of sacks and negative plays, his number was pretty minimal against USF. You look at the passing game, though, Alabama, certainly been questioned. Can they win games throwing the football? And I think that's certainly something you still have to find out. But I think they have a formidable trio here of guys that have stepped out. Kobe Prentice, a veteran, second on the team in receptions and yards. Gurmy Bernard, only 7 less yards on the same amount of receptions, 5 for him. And, of course, a sensational true freshman, Arai Williams, who's got 207 and 3 scores, had another big play against USF. In that second half that really sparked some momentum for them and really helped put that game away. So that's a phenomenal group right here, Nick. These 3 guys are really separating themselves. Kendrick Law, CJ Dupree, some other guys that can potentially get involved. It's still a very talented group. Those 3 right there separating themselves from the herd. GM Miller's looking very good. The supporting cast, these are the guys we're going to roll with this season. And again, if we can just cut down on the mistakes, this is a good group that can provide consistent offense. What are your opinions, though, on the passing game and what they might be able to provide against a very good secondary?
I'm really proud of what this offense has done so far. I think it's a really solid offense with some really incredible skill players. Milroe, 66% comp rate, about 400 yards passing and 5 touchdowns through the air. Ryan Williams, the 17-year-old, he's just 17, absolutely insane. He's been phenomenal at sensation so far. A really big ad for him, and he's already showing up. 3 touchdowns for him. You read off his stats. I expect Williams to get some more targets in this game, some high targets certainly. Bernard, I've been really happy with him coming over from Washington. I think he's been phenomenal. Want to see him get some more targets. Dupree, he got some targets as well. Want to see him get a couple more catches. A big traditional tight end. He's also really solid as a blocking tight end. Kobe Prentice has looked good. Kendrick Law, I want to see more of him. He only has 1 catch, which he did catch for a touchdown. Want to see a little bit more out of him. Can he get some more targets? Robbie Oots, another traditional tight end. I want to see him get some targets. Miller and Haynes, I think it's a really solid 1-2 punch. Both of them have around 9 yards per carry on the ground. They each have 2 touchdowns, and Milroe has the 4 touchdowns. He's been really solid in the red zone. He's an incredible red zone threat. I think, you just got to run the ball with Milroe in the red zone at this point, especially in closer games, because he is really dynamic and talented. I'm not concerned with this offense. 52.5 points per game so far, 105 total points through these 2 games. I'm happy so far. This offense has looked really good, and I expect another strong showing against this Wisconsin defense that's looked vulnerable at times.
Yeah, it's certainly something we don't seem to see enough of, red zone running by the quarterback. Look at the Wisconsin offense. Tyler Van Dyke comes over from Miami. This guy's shown the ability to be elite in big games. Even had one last year early on against Texas A&M. After that, though, he had, 3 or 4 straight games of interceptions. So he's been about average this far, I would say, for Wisconsin. A guy that I personally just don't think is all that great in terms of, consistency and accuracy. 406 and a touchdown, no picks so far. Been quite average. I think he has some nice receivers, though. He's still with Will Pauling, 10 grabs, 108. Bryson Green's a guy who can certainly stretch the field as well. CJ Williams, a talented player. They have a nice little trio with themselves. Nick Van Dyke, though, this is a guy who he's going to have to be big. He's got the home crowd in his favor, so that's notable. I don't think the nerves will be too much for him against a team like this. He's got, plenty of games under his belt by now in terms of just providing good play. Is that going to be something he does on Saturday? It's certainly very iffy at this point. Again, I think in terms of accuracy, consistency, you might not see it. He's got to be big on third down, though. You're going to be in plenty of 3rd and 5s or more. He's got to be accurate with the ball. I'm just not all that confident he can do so, even though they're about 56% on third down so far this season. This is a major bump in competition.
Certainly a huge step up. We saw Alabama be dominant on third down against USF, which really did bail them out. I remember at one point, I think USF was 0 for 11 on third down. You can get that exact stat for me if you have a chance. They were really bad on third down. Alabama's defense was phenomenal on third down. I expect them to be strong on third down again against this Wisconsin offense, and that's going to be a big key. Van Dyke has not looked phenomenal, has not looked great so far. 6% comp rate, 406 passing yards, and 1 touchdown through 2 games against Western Michigan and South Dakota. They have 27.5 points per game, 55 total points so far. Will Pauling's been a solid receiver so far, 108 yards receiving for him. He's been a decent target. CJ Williams, he's got 2 grabs, including a touchdown. He wants to be a target a little bit more. They're trying to get the ball to him. The offensive line has held up so far as well, given Van Dyke some time to throw a little bit. He's not a phenomenal player. I don't super love him either. I think he's a veteran at this point who hasn't shown me enough at all. I think he's going to have a mistake or two in him. I think he's probably have a turnover or two, probably a pick to the secondary against Alabama, and put this team, if they don't convert on third downs early and find themselves in the crowd lose that energy, it's going to be a very long day for the Badgers.
Yeah, Bama 2 for 17. They held USF to on third down. Only 14% this year for opponents. That's third nationally. They've been phenomenal on the money down. The run game has been very good for Wisconsin, and they're going to test that Bama physicality, who at times they're kind of getting burned up the middle against a very good defensive line. Biggest thing, though, USF had was a rushing quarterback who's got a lot of speed, plenty of size. 23 rushing attempts by Byron Brown. Van Dyke, he's not going to do that one bit. He is as immobile as it gets. So that's one factor that's going to be taken out of the equation for Wisconsin. Ches Malusi, a very good running back. I like what he brings to the table. Of course, they got other guys as well in this room. Tyree Walker hasn't seen much. Cade Yasameli, he's seen a little bit more. Jackson Aker. I think most Badger fans are happy with this running back room. I think you'll see all of them get, bits and pieces of touches throughout this game. The offensive line, though, very good unit. Jack Nelson, Jake Huber at right guard, Jake Renfro. These guys are all senior leaders. Riley Holman's also a veteran, a fourth-year guy, and then a younger player at left guard, Joe Bruner. This offensive line's been phenomenal so far this season. You got to be confident seeing what Alabama allowed last week, Nick. But again, you take that major X factor out of the way, and things are going to be a lot tougher just trying to run downhill straight up. Is this offensive line capable of be good? Of course. But if they don't have that aforementioned balance with a Van Dyke throwing the football, it's going to be a lot harder. And I think even if they do throw the ball with success, it's still going to be hard to run the ball. This offensive line can do it, though, and it's an opportunity to expose a very good defensive line. I got confidence in them to be able to play good in this game, to not make the mental mistakes that Alabama might. They're not going to have, busts. I think Kane Womack's certainly going to scheme up some interesting pass rushes for this unit, Nick. I don't think it's going to work too much on them. O-line's great. Running game, though, will it work?
I don't know if the run game will work, and that's certainly a key aspect for this game. 183 yards of total offense, or 183 yards rushing per game, or total per game so far for this Wisconsin offense that's been able to run the ball effectively. Ches Mazzulla has been a phenomenal 134 yards rushing, 3.8 yards per carry, and 3 scores for him. While Cade Maselli as well has been decent. Trey Walker has gotten a few touches. So this is certainly a unit that's really solid, led by Mazzulla, who's a really solid back. The offensive line has been very strong so far for Wisconsin, been able to provide some solid blocks, cutting down on the mental mistakes. They're going to run the ball a lot here, hopefully trying to attack this defense. I think Alabama's up for the task. Van Dyke, I don't know if he's going to be able to bail out this team through the air, and that could be a problem for this Wisconsin offense.
Now you look at the Alabama defense. You've given up 206 rushing to USF on a lot of attempts, of course. A lot of that was from their quarterback position, who, certainly very good at doing that in his own right. I think this is a good get-back opportunity for a D-line that's been playing outstanding this year. Tim Keenan has been terrific. Damon Payne's a guy in the rotation really like. Tim Smith as well. Q Rasaw, younger players, really stepped up this year. Of course, Robinson, he's also been terrific. Q Robinson, that is, with 2 TFLs already this season. Very good team. Even though they give up some yards rushing and downhill running, kind of phased them at times. They still held them to under 5 yards per carry. They still had 7 TFL. The passing, the pass rush was still outstanding in its own right with 4 sacks. This defensive line is incredibly good. And the linebacking group as well, Nick. I think this is a very exciting part of this team that we talked about in the preseason, how good they are. Jahad Campbell's been flat out elite. Justin Jefferson was making great plays. He'll miss the first half after being ejected for targeting late in last week's game. Deontay Lawson's a phenomenal leader. He's been very quiet for them in the middle this year. He hasn't even made that big of an impact other than he's providing good leadership. Rasaw, aforementioned linebacker as well. I mean, they're incredibly deep with talent across the board there. This is a very good front 6/7, Nick. It's going to be hard for Wisconsin to run the ball. This matchup with the SO line, though, it's going to be a physical one. It's going to be a nice one to watch, but I think they have the upper hand.
It's going to be a physical one, and Alabama looks to have the upper hand in the trenches, but that's a battle to keep an eye on. I've been really happy with what the front part of this defense has been able to do. A really strong unit so far. Jahad Campbell, 20 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, half a sack. Deontay Lawson, 14 total tackles, plus a tackle for loss. Justin Jefferson, who will miss half this game with a targeting call that I thought was a bit controversial. He was having a good game prior to that. I was really noticing him a lot. 12 total tackles for him, plus a sack so far this season. Tim Keenan, 12 total tackles as well, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. Really solid so far. I've liked what I've seen out of the front part of this defense. They've been able to rotate pieces in and out, get a bunch of different guys reps. Tim Smith, Tim Keenan in the middle. There's still a lot of room for them to grow and be dominant. They haven't done a whole lot this year. Kadarius Robinson's been a very special treat so far. Surprised with him. 8 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. Quay Rousseau as well, 6 total tackles for him and a tackle for loss. Really happy what this defense has been able to do. The run defense struggled against a tough scheme that USF runs with that quarterback run, the spread offense for them that they run. A lot of different opportunities for the quarterback to run, a lot of misdirection. Certainly a tough and a weak matchup that we saw Alabama struggle against. We saw them struggle against that goalish offense last year and the year before that when he was at Tennessee. So wasn't totally shocked that they had a bad day. Expecting a huge bounce back here against Wisconsin.
Yeah, Brown, last year almost had 100 yards rushing against Bama, had 108 of the 206 in this year's contest, so that's certainly something that's been a big X factor for them. It's been really hard to slow down. Then you look at the secondary, young group. They've been elite this far. USF had opportunities downfield, just couldn't complete them. There was times where they had a step, deep downfield, and if he puts it on them, it's a completely different ball game for the Bulls. And I think, Wisconsin certainly has that ability. A quarterback that's going to be more accurate than Brown. Receivers that are probably more talented than what USF has. I mean, there's guys here that can certainly create, again, against a secondary that is very young. You have a lot of single high looks with Malachi Moore. He's been great. Keon Sabb, had 2 picks in the opener, playing a lot of slot. Devontae Smith has been playing some slot as well. More importantly, though, the corners. Damani Jackson's showcasing nice improvements. You have 2 true freshmen, though, in Xavier Brown, Jalen Milwaukee. These guys are 5 stars, though. They're certainly up for the challenge, but going on the road against, receivers that are good football players, this is going to be an opportunity to attack. You're going to have one-on-ones. You're going to be able to win on the boundary, and I think that's where the Badgers are going to have to be stout, and this quarterback will have to be accurate, but they will have opportunities, Nick, against the secondary that will eventually be phenomenal, I think, in terms of allowing lesser opportunities. The talent, though, high-end, but experience not so much. This is an opportunity for Wisconsin to take advantage of it, though.
This is a unit it's a really young unit. Malachi Moore is probably your biggest veteran there, the biggest experienced player as a 5th-year player. 9 total tackles for him, 2 pass breakups so far. This is a secondary that looked good. Although they got beat at times against South Florida, that Brown was just not able to complete passes. He overthrew a lot of receivers, bailed out the secondary that looked bad. The corners looked very weak at times against USF. Was concerned about that. Keon Sabb's been really good so far. 5 total tackles. He had 2 picks in the first game, including a pick 6. He's been really solid. Or not a pick 6, but he had 2 picks in that game. He had a pass breakup as well. I think Damani Jackson's looked solid. I think James Smith's looked okay as well. I want to see a little bit more of some of these other pieces that they're rotating in and out. I think Xavier Brown has been really solid so far. Bray Hubbard's been not bad either. Obviously, aforementioned Malachi Moore has been really solid. This is a matchup against a Van Dyke player who's known for making mistakes, is a error-prone player who's thrown a lot of picks in his career. Would love to see the Alabama defense get a few picks here, swing the momentum on their side.
A veteran player in Deshaun Jones, who transferred in, has played pretty well this season so far. So they got plenty of different guys out here. Very stout defense, though, for Alabama. Looking at Wisconsin, Luke Fickell and the Badgers have a front 6 that will be, leaned on the very physicality. And, of course, they got to keep contained. That's going to be one of the biggest things here. You start with a scheme. They run about a 2-4-5. It's an interesting scheme that Wisconsin runs. But they have very good outside linebackers. You start with Darrell Peterson, who was one of the more productive players in the conference. On the inside, Jaheim Thomas has been a real standout. Jake Chaney, a veteran linebacker. John P.S. on the other side, outside linebackers, also capable of providing some stuff. Transferring in from William and Mary. Leon Lowry can get on the field and make plays. Elijah Hill so far up front has been a big player. Kurt Neal, a guy who on the interior is also going to have to be very stout in trying to, disrupt. If they can do that, disrupt on the interior, keep Milroe contained, I think they're going to have opportunities to create with a very good secondary. Nick, what do you think of this front 6, though? Because the linebackers, even though it's a good unit, they haven't been exactly great enforcers so far this year. Defense hasn't really been exposed. They've been pretty good across the board. But the linebackers in the pass rush certainly has been less than desirable so far, but this is a great opportunity to get things cranked up.
This is certainly a good opportunity here against a good, balanced Bama offense. In theory, that has had some struggles here. Jake Chaney's been really solid so far this year. 8 total tackles for him. He's looked really good. I like what they're able to do. This is a very odd setup that this defense runs. It certainly does lend themselves to potentially have some success as well. Darrell Peterson, I want to see a little bit more out of him. He's still a really talented player. 6 total tackles plus a sack for him so far this season. Ben Barton has been solid for this team. He needs to have a solid day as well. He had 5 total tackles so far this season. They bring in a bunch of different looks. They have a bunch of different pieces here in this defense. I like what they have with Kurt Neal as well. He has 8 total tackles plus a half tackle for loss. They got to be strong and big and strong in the trenches. Can they win the battle against this offensive line for Alabama that's made some mistakes here? Certainly looks like it's likely.
We'll focus on the outside linebackers against the offensive tackles. Again, Booker kind of playing out of position. The guy at right tackle, Thornby, not being all that good himself. So I think there's opportunities for them to strike because Peterson's good. He had a lot of production last season coming off the edge. 10 TFLs for him. Was able to get 4.5 sacks. I mean, there's some guys here that can win their matchups against these tackles, Nick. I wouldn't be shocked if they were able to come down with 1 or 2. So I think the containment is very important, and I think these guys will be able to win one-on-one from time to time against these offensive linemen. So I think there's certainly, potential they can put Alabama in long down the distances, and they'll be cooking if they can do that.
I think there's certainly an opportunity for them to get some big sacks on Milroe, get some pressure on him, make him uncomfortable with what they have on the exterior. Jaheim Thomas, John P.S. as well have been really solid for this team. Thomas, 12 total tackles for him, second leading tackler on the team. He's a guy you want to see a lot of. Can he get pressure early on? What's his battle going to look like on the offensive line? Can he win that battle? Certainly looks like he can.
Now looking at the secondary for the Badgers, they only allowed over 250 yards on 3 different occasions. One was, a 251-yarder against Cam Ward. Georgia Southern, they had a lot of yards because they're playing from behind where they had 5 interceptions, and then Garrett Nussmeier had a field day in the bowl game. Other than that, though, they were very good throughout the season, including Ohio State, where they ended up having 2 interceptions on McCord in that one. Now you flash forward to 2024. They've been flat-out dominant, only 255 yards allowed. They've snagged an interception. They have some ball hawks back there. Hunter Wooler, who is phenomenal in all regards, especially as a tackler, a senior leader there. That I certainly am very interested to see what his role may be in terms of trying to move him around. And of course, Ricardo Hallman is a phenomenal corner that, it's going to be interesting to see him against that freshman Ryan Williams, right? He's certainly going to have not just him, though. He'll have plenty of matchups in this one. How the other guys look, though, the guys we talked about in the preseason, Isaiah Forquan, Preston Zachman, guys like that, how will they look in this contest is the biggest question. I don't think the secondary is going to be all that phased because I do have those 2 great leaders there. But there'll be opportunities, I think, for Alabama to get downfield and win. This is the thing I'm worried about the most, though, Nick. The offensive tackle's shaky. Secondary's very good. Throwing the football might be incredibly difficult for Alabama. So Milroe's legs, they can contain him. They might be able to just hold this offense in check throughout the game.
Certainly going to be a lot of running from Alabama in this game. They're hopefully going to be able to run the ball successfully. Hunter Wooler's really solid for this Wisconsin team, top tackle on this team, 15 total tackles, 2 pass breakups. He's been a big key for this team at safety. I like what he's been able to do. Preston Zachman's been really solid safety as well, 5 total tackles for him. He's been a big piece. Ricardo Hallman has been solid for them as well. He's going to be a guy they rely on to have a good day. He has 2 total tackles and a pass breakup, while Ben Barton, I mentioned earlier, on the defensive line. And I look at the rest of this team, they're going to have to find a way to be strong in the secondary. I think they have some solid pieces, some good veteran leadership. They've been good against the pass so far. Now they're facing, a much better passing attack in Alabama than what Western Michigan and South Dakota had. Can Alabama find some success through the air? I certainly think they can. That's going to be a big key to this game is, can this offensive line give Milroe time to throw the ball? Can he hit his star young receiver, Ryan Williams, who should have a really interesting matchup?
Wooler and Hallman combined for 9 interceptions last year, so those guys can get it done if given opportunities. Tail the tape, the team comparisons. Quarterback going to Bama with ease. Running back, I'm going to call it about even. I think both groups are pretty deep in their own regards. Wide receiver, I'll give Alabama the edge there. O-line, I'll go ahead and go with Wisconsin, a unit that they have no question marks. There's no real concerns there. They have a good, sturdy group. D-line and linebacker for the Crimson Tide. And I'll call the secondary even because those 2 players I alluded to are very good. They can compete for all conference. In the Big Ten, Alabama, a lot of talent, a lot of young players, though, that certainly might give up some breathing room for Wisconsin. So I'm going to call it even, though, at the end of the day. What do you think of these team comparisons, Nick? Do you think they're fair?
This is a fair team comparison. I think quarterback does go to Alabama. I think, running back, you could potentially give it to Alabama. I think I would give it to Alabama. But the rest of the board, I think, is fair, although I do think the secondary for Alabama has success as well. I do think that you could skew to the evens to Bama, although I do think that O-line is very clearly for Wisconsin. That's a very strong unit compared to a shaky unit for the Crimson Tide.
Now looking at the final thoughts and prediction, Bama, enough of the silly mistakes. It's time to show up on the road here Got to be more disciplined. Got to cut those penalties in half. Get pressure on Tyler Van Dyke. I think that's your best opportunity to succeed. And even though they're facing a good offensive line, I think Bama has too far talented athletes to not get home often, or at least get into his face. And Wisconsin need to force at least 2 turnovers, create short fields, because I just don't think they're going to be able to move the ball downfield too much. Offense will need to make plays on the boundary, like I alluded to. Those receivers against those corners, they'll be able to win with some of those in-breaking routes, out-breaking routes, quick curls and whatnot. They're going to have opportunities to catch the ball and run, so I got to make plays out there. 28-13 for me. 15-point spread. I'm going with a 15-point victory for Alabama, so do what you wish with that. This just seems too ideal. 28 points for the Tide, 13 for the Badgers. I just don't know if they're going to be able to score in the red zone when they do get there. I think Bama, they're going to be able to protect the football. I think they will cut down on those mistakes. I think Miller will be able to showcase his legs and make some good throws downfield, in the intermediate range to pick up yardage, and they'll stay on track. Even though I am concerned about the tackles for Alabama and how they may look, I think this offense is going to look a lot better under DeBoer in this game. He's going to get things figured out and cranked up. 15-point victory for me, Nick. I am a little worried, though, that they can go into this game and potentially lose because of those things I alluded to, because if they do, continue the mistakes and they do turn the ball over a couple times, they're probably going to lose this one.
So certainly a tough matchup. No prediction for me as a Bama fan. I will be going to the game. I'm excited to watch Alabama play this year. My first time seeing the Crimson Tide play this year. I'm traveling up to Madison. Excited to check out all the sites up there in Wisconsin. Also going to catch a Green Bay Packers game the next day. Certainly disappointed that Jordan Love will not be playing in that. Hope he's feeling well in his recovery and recovering from his injury he picked up in the NFL game. As for this game, I think this game could be close. We've seen Alabama have some tough games on the road where they were lofty favorites, lost to LSU, lost to Tennessee, struggled against Texas where they were a lofty favorite in that game as well. So we've seen these Alabama teams struggle in the past on the road when they're, a double-digit favorite against teams that have tough road environments. This is no joke, Camp Randall. I've heard great things about how loud it's going to be in there. I'm excited to see it for myself firsthand. Cut down the silly mistakes, no issues in the offensive line, no false starts, be focused, everyone keep no holding, none of that. If they can avoid all those big mistakes, give Miller time. Let Miller run the ball a lot more, use his best asset, the legs, let him run, let him break free, get some huge gains on the ground. This game could certainly be close. I can see it happening. I've seen this script happen many times. I hope Alabama runs away with this one. 15 points is a lofty spread. Very interesting that that's what the books have it at. Wisconsin, they're no joke. This is a team that's looked good against some of their weaker opponents at times. The defense has looked really strong. The offense does concern me. I think Alabama will be able to get enough stops to pull away in this one late. This is a very intriguing matchup of Week 3. A tough road test for Kalen DeBoer, his first road game in a tough environment. Want to see how he fares, certainly.
That's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.